Hey everybody, Dave Whitmer, CEO of Whitmer's Consulting Group. Doing a little CEO interview with Kevin, McCrudden. So I'm trying to think. Sorry, I was a little delayed there, Kevin. I was trying to think when we first started talking, and I know we talked probably about 12, 15 years ago, and then picked it up probably about 8 years ago. And then really just haven't seen much, but I think of you usually on January 1st. It's automatic. So tell us a bit about yourself and then certainly make a reference to January 1st there.
David, thank you so much. And yeah, so it's been, on and off for a long time. We've interacted with each other. So it's actually January 2nd
Oh, okay.
of
Sorry about
every
that.
year. So January 2nd of every year is National Motivation and Inspiration Day, and January is Motivation and Inspiration Month. I had it passed after the tragic events of 9/11. I had it passed by the United States Congress and New York State to acknowledge the date as a date where people establish goals and do goal setting. And then I have an actual app called the Simple Goals app, where people can create their goals for the year. And the intent is, imagine if we were all goal oriented, if everyone had goals that they were trying to achieve, and not just wish lists of each year people have their New Year's resolutions, and
Mhm.
85 to 90% of people never follow through on them, not even to the end of January statistically. So the idea is, what if we really establish these goals and work diligently towards achieving goals every single year? And what I refer to is, look, as you know, every company has goals for their employees. Like every sales manager, every salesperson, every VP, they have goals they have to meet on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis. So why wouldn't we have our own personal goals that we want to achieve? So that was the intent.
And if you're an employee and you don't know what your goals are, I can guarantee you that that's fine, but somebody has a goal for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
But and that makes sense. And fun little project that you managed to pass through and good recognition and really it is a good time to reflect, right? But your core business is still working executives, helping them
Yep.
helping
Management,
them go ahead.
as you know, management and leadership is really an area where I've focused over the past, I'd say 15, 20 years since we first spoke, right? And that really comes out in an extension of doing corporate training, both internally and externally as a consultant. And so when you wear that hat, right, that director of training and development, working with, senior management all the way down to frontline employees, frontline salespeople, for, doing that for 20 something years, you understand different challenges that executives have within a company. I mean, Amazon just announced today that next year they're going to make people go back to the office. And I think, it's obviously been a conversation since COVID, like, how do we get people back into the office? Do we need people back in the office? And I think, while we talk about, and people like to use this phrase transformational, most people are not transformational, but COVID was transformational. It changed how we conducted business. It changed the office environment. It changed really our culture in many ways. But I think companies and corporations are still trying to get people back into the culture of their company.
Mhm.
And so it's not just about collecting a paycheck. It's about, look, you're a part of this company, and we want to have a company centric culture where people interact with each other. They kind of get a vibe with each other. And while people talk about it a lot, I think that's really the movement, is people want people back in the office, kind of sharing in what the vibe of the company is and what the company is trying to achieve. So, I mean, even if Amazon's saying, look, we need to get back to the office, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And, certainly when we talk about culture and leadership, it's something I've spent, 20 plus years doing.
Yeah, totally. Hey, when I'm just gonna pause this for a second, Kevin. And I have somebody that's late here. Perfect. Yeah, so we'll just go back to where you're talking about Amazon. So Amazon's bringing people back into the office next year,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. I believe that like certain jobs can be done, or a portion of it can be done, but like if when you take a look at the incubation around Amazon and some of the things that have, some of the tech companies, you know, would those have happened without having meetings that sort of went from a half an hour to 2 weeks, right? Like they just, you get in a good meeting and all of a sudden it's like, oh, and then if we did this, and then if we did that, and I think it's really, really hard to replicate when you're all remote.
Yeah, and I think, once again, about leadership, someone who's a VP or someone who's the owner, I did a session not too long ago with a group of CEOs. And, we talked a little bit about, this idea of, hiring and how challenging it is to quote unquote get talented people. And so I always like to refer to this idea of, sports. As you know, I played semi-professional soccer. The the challenge of creating a championship team and bringing people together. And so I refer to the New York Yankees on a regular basis and say, listen, how many times are they in the top 5 or 10 in spending on players?
Hmm.
And, they've been in the top 10 almost always. And when was the last time they won a World Series? 2009. And so the reality is you can't buy a culture. You can't buy players. You have to have the right mix. And you only get that idea or the understanding of what the mix is when you get to be with everybody, when you get to see them on a daily basis, how they interact with other people, what the culture of the environment is about. So when I was speaking to the CEOs, they're like, look, we're having a hard time attracting the right people because some of their first questions, right? So when we talk about HR, some of their first questions are, like, well, do I get to work remote, and how often do
Hmm.
I get paid? And so they essentially want to be paid to not be in your office. And so for CEOs or people that are responsible for a team, my challenge would be, listen, you're responsible for your culture. You're responsible for the team that you're building. And if the very first thing that people want to do is not be at your office and be somewhere else, then guess what? That's not the person you want to hire, regardless of how talented you think they may be. I don't care if they're, the A student from Harvard.
Hmm.
If they don't want to actually be at your office and work with you and for you, then that's not your candidate. Get someone
Yeah,
else. Get someone
yeah,
else
so
who's
true.
hungry and really wants to work for you and your company, that'll have a passion for what you're trying to build.
Yeah, and it really is about making that contagious and getting, really getting that extra 10% out of people, right? Like
Love,
how,
yep,
yeah,
love it.
that's so true. And so working with management teams and I know that you've written books, right? Do you leverage that or those books into some of your practices?
Listen, David, one of the things that I have a hard time getting away from is obviously some of the things that I've written, right? So I've written 8 books and audiobooks, but the very first one, Who Are You? Become the Very Best You That You Can Be, was one of the most, I guess, significant additions to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in 60 years. And I regularly say, like, who am I to have the audacity to make any sort of addition or
Hmm.
change to Abraham Maslow's brilliant work, right? It's taught in almost every university in the world. And
Hmm.
yet I took his one-dimensional model and made it a multi-dimensional model. And it really is the foundational study on motivation and what motivates people. And I think when you are around people and understand how to motivate them, once again, for anyone that's had any sort of background or experience in sports or professional sports, you know that there's some people that need to be coddled. There's some people that need a gentle pat on the back. There's other people that need a kick in the butt. There's some people that are really motivated by pushing them, and then there's some people that really start to retreat and feel insecure and uncertain when you push them too hard. So the only way to understand that is when you get to spend some time with them and get to see how they act under different circumstances. So I think my experience in writing Who Are You? become the very best you that you can be. That foundational component about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how we motivate people, how do we inspire people, which once again goes back to National Motivation and Inspiration Day. How do we motivate and inspire people to uplift them to be their very best selves? And I mean, I've been doing that now for 25 years, 26 years.
Cool. And just so you don't happen to have like you have a good network of people that share your same philosophy for larger national engagements, that
Yeah,
sort
I
of thing?
think, David, it's an interesting question, right? So when I first started into this, motivational leadership space, you really look at like Napoleon Hill and Zig Ziglar and, uh, you know, I suppose Wayne Dyer and Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy. Brian Tracy gave me a phenomenal quote about my book and what I was trying to do. You know, compared me to sort of the oracle or something. It was an unbelievable quote. And we speak a common language. And so what I talk about, right, in creating National Motivation and Inspiration Day, I also created the American Motivation Awards. And it's really about us standing on the shoulders of the giants that were before us. It's a very common theme, but how do we build upon it? And so the themes are very similar. And so there is an enormous network of people that are in this motivational leadership space where we have a lot of common beliefs. And so I'll have a few guys that I'll talk to here and there. We'll get on a conference call. Like I said, I have the American Motivation Awards where we honor these people that have been quote unquote the leaders in motivational leadership space as thought leaders. But yeah, that's and look, you and I mean, we'll touch base and we'll talk about what's this or what's that or what are you doing here? How do you see this working out?
Mhm. Is there any big plans on the future? Anything else? I imagine you probably got another book or two in you, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure everybody in your personal network goes, "Oh, another book,
Yeah.
really?"
Well, this one's a little different. There's two projects. And so we talked about this a little bit is,
Hmm.
so after 20 years of being this personal professional development space and being on TV and having the books, I launched out and I created a documentary. And it's a very serious topic. It's about God and whatever. And so I think what I'm fearful of is that people go to, LinkedIn or they go to Google and they look at my profile and they'll say like, oh, this guy's a spiritual leader. This guy talks about God, and I certainly don't want him, in my office talking about. And I get that, but I don't. I haven't eliminated 30 years of education about corporate development. I've literally created 3 university systems for 3 different companies, right? So created an entire university system from frontline workers all the way up to senior management that I've implemented. And so that one project is it's not an offshoot, it's not a tangent, but it's something that obviously I don't bring into a corporate
Hmm.
environment. I know better. um so I think that's a big project that I've just completed, and believe it or not, I have a coloring book for kids that will be associated with that. It's called The Light of Man. And so excited about that, having fun with it. I think in this corporate development, this HR, personal professional development space, I spent about 5 years at a university, teaching MBA students, visiting MBA students, and helped launch an incubator. So helping startups and having them understand the process of developing a company. One of the things I think is interesting is that I've come across this little bit of a space that I think is developing, and maybe you and I can talk about it a little bit more. There's a lot of young professionals that are filling the space of their parents. They're being handed companies. They're being
Hmm.
given companies that they have to run after their parents have successfully, or mom or dad have successfully run for 20, 30, 40 years, 50 years. And now they have to somehow fill in those shoes of being an owner of companies. And many of them don't have MBAs. Many of them don't have the background. And many of them don't have the passion of starting the business. They're not the ones that started the business. They just got to enjoy the benefits of the business after their
Hmm.
parents built it. but now they're being thrust into this position of being CEOs of some fairly significant American companies that I see that are pretty large, and they don't necessarily have the skill set. And so I'm seeing a space there where there needs to be some education. There needs to be some coaching and mentoring, which I've done for a handful of CEOs that are like that, and senior management that are preparing to take over a significant company, and they need some coaching.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a big obstacle for a lot of people, like, and it's just really, how do you replicate that passion? Right. It's impossible to have the same passion as these folks that built that company and spent, you know, 20 years in the trenches trying to put food on the table to, in some cases, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're
So,
exactly right. Exactly right.
yeah, but that's an interesting topic. We should definitely have a discussion around that. I'd like to see how you tackle that, what the game plan would be. Obviously, it's different in every instance, but the learning pattern and structure is similar, right?
Well, as you know, it's similar in the sense that it's a small, it's small to medium sized businesses, right? With under 500 employees typically, and
Mhm.
so the skill set is, it's interesting because it's a different culture, it's a different time, but the similarities exist. So you can't do cookie cutter, right? It's not one fits
Yeah.
all. But as you and I've talked about this. The idea is, you got to do an appropriate needs analysis. You have to ask them about, what the challenges are, where the weak spots are, how to help them grow so that they can address their, so-called weaknesses. Or I had a very good friend call it an underdeveloped strength because it's just not an area you focused on, right? So yeah, she's a brilliant person. But yeah, so just those are the things that you need to work on.
Yeah. Well, and really, as being in the working with these senior executives for 25 years, and having um, a training, education background within organizations, really, it's people should be coming to you and say, "This is my problem. How can we fix it?" Right? It shouldn't be you going, "I do this, I can do this, I can do this." Right? It should be big companies that they go, "How the heck do I get over this obstacle?"
Oh
Right?
yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's why you're in business. I mean, that's, you're consulting and you're helping people address problems and challenges. And that's, my background and training is so vast at this point, whether it be small companies, mom and pop companies, startups, or whether it be, corporate 500 companies that, where I've built university systems. It's, it runs the gamut.
Yeah, totally. All right. So, Kevin, if anybody is, we're gonna have another conversation. You got me thinking about something. So,
Good.
if anybody's interested in getting a hold of Kevin, give him your contact details, and of course, I'll put him in wherever this is going to appear in bios and things like that. But how can people get a hold of you, Kevin?
Like the easiest way, look, you just Google me, or you can go to my name, kevinmccrudden is
Hmm.
my website, or email me at kevin.
Perfect. And like I said, if it's on a web page, or you know, if God willing, if I have enough space to put it, it'll be anywhere that I post it out to.
Sounds great.
But it's great speaking with you, and let's circle back in a bit, talk about that, the transitioning of knowledge.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
Speak to you soon.
Thank you, man. Take care. Nice seeing you.
Bye.